Okay, synapses. A synapse is the site where a neuron shares an electrical impulse with another cell. The impulse may be shared chemically, by far the most common case, or electrically. So the synapse may be called a chemical synapse or an electrical synapse. A neuron may be described as presynaptic or postsynaptic, and this is very handy terminology that you should definitely remember. Axon terminals from a presynaptic neuron may connect the cell, may connect the presynaptic neuron to a postsynaptic neuron on the postsynaptic neuron's dendrites, their body, or even on an axon of a postsynaptic neuron. In chemical synapses, the postsynaptic cell may be another neuron, a skeletal muscle fiber, or a gland. In electrical synapses, the postsynaptic cell is always another neuron. Okay, in chemical synapses, the electrical impulse in the axon terminal causes a neurotransmitter to be released from synaptic vesicles in the presynaptic membrane. The vesicles are released by exocytosis. Then the neurotransmitter diffuses across the synaptic cleft and binds to receptors on the postsynaptic membrane. We already learned that in the neuromuscular junction, the neurotransmitter acetylcholine is used. The neurotransmitter triggers a change in the membrane potential of the postsynaptic cell. The effect of a neurotransmitter may be excitatory or inhibitory. Excitatory effects help generate action potentials. Inhibitory effects reduce the ability of a postsynaptic cell to generate an action potential. There may be thousands of chemical synapses on the cell body of a single neuron. Many are active at any given moment, releasing different excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters. The activity of the postsynaptic neuron depends on the summing of all of the excitatory and inhibitory stimuli at any given moment. If the stimulus is excitatory and sufficient, receptor binding will lead to an action potential in the postsynaptic skeletal muscle fiber or neuron. The effects of one action potential on the postsynaptic membrane are short-lived because the neurotransmitter is either broken down by enzymes or reabsorbed. Therefore, additional action potentials must arrive at the axon terminal, and additional neurotransmitter must be released in order to strengthen and prolong the response, whatever it happens to be. Okay, that was chemical synapses. Now, electrical synapses. These are uncommon. Electrical synapses are found only between neurons, and in electrical synapses, the presynaptic and postsynaptic membranes are bound together tightly. There are gap junctions between the two neurons that allow the passage of ions between the two cells. And since electrical impulses or action potentials are propagated by sodium ions, this ensures that the electrical impulse will cross from one neuron to the next virtually instantly. But as I said, these are not common. Okay, so now a bit on reflexes. Reflexes are an immediate involuntary motor response to a sensory stimuli. They protect us from harm. The reflex arc is the nervous pathway that produces the reflex. And there are 5 steps of a reflex arc. They are 1, stimulation of a sensory receptor, 2, activation of a sensory neuron, 3, central nervous system processing, which may not occur, 4, activation of a motor neuron, 5, response by an effector, which might be a muscle or a gland. Sensory receptors may respond to physical injury, harmful chemicals, harmful temperatures or pressures. They may sense harmful smells, sights, sounds, tastes, or loss of balance. And then commenting on step 3, which remember was central nervous system processing, which may not occur. In some reflexes, there are 1 or more interneurons between the sensory and the motor neurons in the reflex arc. And this helps to create an appropriate motor response by stimulation of the appropriate motor neurons, but it is not present in all reflex arcs. All right, so a bit on reflexes. Reflexes can be classified in 4 different ways, and you might see different things. They may be classified by association with development. They may be innate versus acquired. By the response made by the reflex. It might be a somatic or visceral response, by complexity of the circuit, whether there is one or more than one synapse, by processing site, which might be in the spinal cord or in the brain. So I'll just talk about classification of reflexes using the complexity of the circuit. Reflexes may be monosynaptic or polysynaptic. Monosynaptic reflexes involve only a sensory neuron, a single synapse, and a motor neuron. And I will use as an example a stretch reflex, which is a monosynaptic reflex that originates in muscle spindles, the sensory organs, and muscles that sense stretch. These are important for maintaining the proper muscle tone, and we have already learned about them, so we're going to use them again. Muscles that maintain posture have very sensitive muscle spindles, and these muscles continually monitor stretch and stimulate motor neurons and the associated muscle fibers as needed. And a clinical correlation is the testing of the patellar reflex. When the patellar ligament is hit with a hammer, muscle spindles in the quadriceps are stretched. The sensory information enters the spinal cord through spinal nerves L2 to L4, and then there's one synapse, and then the motor commands exit the spinal cord through spinal nerves L1, 2, 3, and 4, and they synapse on the quadriceps. The quadriceps then contracts to counteract the stretch that it just received, and the knee joint extends quickly. So we're all pretty familiar with that. It hits somebody's patellar ligament with a hammer, and their knee joint quickly makes a little extension or a little kick forward. Polysynaptic reflexes may involve anywhere from 2 to hundreds of synapses between the sensory neuron, interneurons, and motor neurons. Sensory neurons synapse on interneurons in the central nervous system. Then the central nervous system processes the information and sends impulses to modify the commands sent to motor neurons. It may take several milliseconds for an impulse to travel from a sensory receptor to the cerebral cortex and back from the cortex to a skeletal muscle. So, polysynaptic reflexes that involve the central nervous system are slightly slower, but in return, you get a more complex motor response. Interestingly, the central nervous system may strengthen or suppress spinal reflexes. Okay, now neural circuits. So a little vocabulary here. Neuronal pools are groups of interconnected neurons that have a related function. Neural circuits are pathways that connect the neurons in neuronal pools. So there are different types of neural circuits, different ways of connecting neurons in their neuronal pools. All right, there is serial processing. In serial processing, information is relayed from one neuron or neuronal pool to another in a series, one after another. Pain sensations on their way to consciousness may pass through two neuronal pools in sequence. Sort of like, do you really want to go there? Do you really want to go? Do you really want to go to consciousness? Yes or no? Parallel processing. A neural circuit may relay information from one neuron or neuronal pool to several neurons or neuronal pools. In parallel processing, different neurons or neuronal pools process the same information at the same time, and many different responses occur simultaneously in this kind of processing. Pain sensations may undergo parallel processing. After stepping on a sharp object, a person might withdraw their foot, shift their body position to maintain their balance. They might feel the pain and shout, ouch, all at the same time. The patellar reflex is a stretch reflex, as we just learned, but it is also a monosynaptic reflex, a spinal reflex, a somatic reflex, and an innate reflex. So the classifications of reflexes are not mutually exclusive, rather they are just helpful for describing reflexes in different situations. Okay, and then lastly, I included 3 slides that have important terminology, and you can go through these major anatomical areas: the central nervous system, the spinal cord, and the brain; the peripheral nervous system, all the other parts of the nervous system; the autonomic nervous system, just that visceral, involuntary part of the nervous system. They don't have the somatic nervous system written on this list, but that would be the kind of buddy of the autonomic nervous system. All right, then ganglia, which are little clumps of cell bodies within the peripheral nervous system, and they appear gray because they are cell bodies. They're nerves, which are bundles of axons in the peripheral nervous system, and they appear white because the axons are wrapped up in myelin sheaths, which are white, and so on. You can read through these definitions and make sure that you understand them all, because in this coming unit, Unit 3, we will use all of this vocabulary in every lecture, okay? And you can just go through these slides. Okay, very good. I'll see you soon.